Hello, how is it June already? I don't know how that's happened, but here we are. It's not a huge amount of new finds. I still have that space problem that I spoke about, I think, last time, that I've just accumulated too much. I'm going to have to be a bit brutal and make some, as politicians love to say, difficult decisions. Sooner or later. God, we're in that zone, aren't we? Anyway, zooming towards July. Anyway, I've kind of, to some extent, been on my travels. I've been in different parts of the country over the last weeks and at various points picked up a couple of second-hand things. First off being, I hope I'm pronouncing this right. I think his surname is pronounced Crichton. I don't know. I should have looked it up before, and if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. Anyway, I was sort of only dimly aware of this one. I don't think I've ever seen the film. I mean, I'm principally aware of him. Actually, most people would say Jurassic Park, but actually through Westworld, which I do actually have a copy, and it's quite rare now, I think. I think I got a sort of imported reprint of the paperback that is basically the script from Westworld, and I've been meaning to get onto that one and never quite have, but that's for a rainy day or whatever. This, I know very little about this. I mean, I'm assuming this gorilla is a feature. I mean, it's a part of the world. Incidentally, did I ever touch on this in one of these? I may have mentioned it. There's a non-fiction historical book called King Leopold's Ghost, dealing with 19th century history in that part of the world, which I suppose in some way relates, presumably, but I've only got about a chapter into this, so I can't say, but I'm imagining we can assume some quality with that name on it. Next up now, I returned to the very picturesque location of Porthmadog in North Wales. They have a number of charity shops and also just a little bit along the coastal path from there. There's a place called Borthy Guest, which has a little shack that is like one of those book donation type of places. This was from one of the charity shops. I kind of felt I had to leave with something. So not that I'm a particular student of boxing or anything like that, but you know, people my age would, you know, you remember Muhammad Ali from the immense kind of media presence he had back then, and so I dimly remember him from chat shows, and I think he actually did a few TV ads. There was just, I forget what it was for. Is it an aftershave? There was this TV ad where he does this kind of, hi, here's my latest poem, and he rattles this thing, float like a butterfly, sting like a bee, and the punch of Ali, and to the, I really don't remember. I've got aftershave in my mind for this for some reason. It may well not have been, but anyway, I thought, well, I'm coming away with something from this charity shop. All right, yeah, and actually I've got about a third of the way in. It is quite interesting. I mean, I knew there was, most people are aware of this kind of this kind of politicised and I suppose fairly militant within the part of Ali's career. And while in happier days the two had kind of been on a friendly basis, as this battle in Manila approached, you might describe as shit talking that was going on seemed to get quite toxic. So yeah, I never really expected to be picking up a book on boxing and getting into it, but don't know much about the writer. I mean, Mark Cram, from what I've read so far, he seems quite set on demolishing what he perceives as the Ali myth. I don't think that particularly makes him an Albert Goldman, a writer I will return to, but he's, there are certain, I suppose, popular suppositions about Ali that Cram is quite keen to dispel. But anyway, we'll see as I get further into it. Next up now, this doesn't happen often, but every now and again I pick up a book that happens to be written by someone I know. In this case, Paolo Cedesari, who I know more, I suppose, as a filmmaker. I've met him through sort of various film-related events, but I've also seen he put on a play a few years ago, maybe about 4 years ago, or just before lockdown. He put on this one-man play, which featured, of all people, Gripper Stepson from Grange Hill, which was quite something. And I went to a performance of this probably 2019-ish, and it was quite a powerful thing. Mark Savage, aka Gripper, was in fine form. Quite an intense performance. Actually, as a side note, I found, I remember him, as many of us do, people my age would, as, Gripper Stepson was the nation's school bully at the time. You know, it's watched with a mixture of fascination and terror. Quite a nice bloke, actually. It struck me as a friendly and all right guy. But, you know, that's what acting's about, I suppose. But anyway, this, based on a real-life murder case, it's not one I'm familiar with, but after not seeing his wife for several days, P.J. James discovers her dead in the freezer. Surrey Detective Ferdy is frustrated by P.J.'s refusal to answer any questions. He sets about building a set of circumstantial evidence against him. While he's away from investigators, P.J. tells of his grief and explains his side. Now, it's all set in the wilds of Surrey. We might call this Woking Noir. Now, I'm about maybe halfway through it. At this point, I've got to say that PJ looks guilty as hell, but it may well turn out it sort of hints that there may be a twist to this, possibly. But anyway, yeah, very readable. Nice work, Paolo. Finally, you fellows, this was from the Borthy Guest book exchange bit, which it's not the first bunter novel I've picked up in the last couple of months. However, I found this more readable than the other one. The other one's in a pile somewhere. I forget the title of it, but I'm not sure if they were written at different times. But this one I found I could zip through quite easily. The other one got tedious quite quickly. Now these, I can't say they've aged too well. I think they're best approached. I wouldn't recommend giving these to your kids. They represent a very different time and a very different social... I mean, okay, there are people who kind of exist within the rarefied posh school strata of society that is depicted here, but from a sort of adult perspective, if you kind of know a bit of the history of them and are able to look at them with a certain amount of detachment, I suppose, at their best they are quite entertaining and quite amusing. This one certainly no problem. I just a bit of a rainy night while I was away in Wales, just comfortably sit in a B&B room and zip through this. Now, it obviously centres around a level of humour that we can safely describe as sizist. Billy Bunter famously is the fat owl of the remove. I think it's one of these situations, I don't know how long these were written for. I think they might have started before the First World War. This publication is from 1968. Now, it may well be a sort of older story. It was just, pushed out into print again. But, by the late 60s, this, that would have been after Eve had been on at the cinemas. This kind of world is, well, I'd like to think it was receding. As I think we're still feeling hasn't receded enough in my opinion. But anyhow, I think we're talking, as far as these go, we're talking, I suppose, of a more innocent lens on that school system that we might otherwise take. So, from the title, Bunter is, I suppose, central to the story. They're not entirely, actually. I mean, this concerns Harry Wharton is also a principal player, and he's one of the good eggs of the remove. They seem like such fucking goodies, the kids, the good eggs in this. I find it hard to warm to them sometimes, put it that way. But now the crooked captain in question, there's this backstory which I'm not sure was ever covered in another novel, but there's a sort of lead up to this. They've got this kid who's relatively new, who was kind of sent there from India. He's mixed race from some Indian school where he's been extracted and placed at Greyfriars by nefarious parties. He's meant to be sort of acting as a sort of sleeper agent or something. These various parties of whom the crooked captain is principal villain, I suppose. That there's complications in a will that Harry Wharton, I think it's his uncle, has left him this princely amount of money. That's left to Wharton on the condition. This crooked captain guy, he's also related. This will is on the condition that Wharton doesn't turn out a bad egg. He's got to sort of get through school without being suspended or chucked out or anything like this guy, which I think is the sort of his distant cousin or something. So the crooked captain, they've installed the new kid from the Indian school to, I forget his name actually, hang on. His name is Da Costa, but he's frequently referred to in this as the Eurasian. Yes, these books and race, that's an interesting area. Now, I did a little bit of background reading or viewing. It was argued in one that for the time he was writing these and for the medium he was writing within, he was a fairly progressive voice in that he's cast there's a fully Indian character in a lot of these books whose name is Huri Jamset Ram Singh, and he's cast as a kind of equal with the good eggs. He's one of that group. He's seen as, you know, as an equal player in the circle of the more admirable characters within these. That said, I've read a few of these and he never seems to be given much of an active role. I've not seen many where he's much of an active centre of the story. He seems to function more as a bit of like this one-man Greek chorus where, you know, if any sort of pronouncement is made or agreement is made or opinion is made, he will then sort of weigh into the affirmative, but in sort of comedy broken English. So, "We shall miss him," said Harry, as he and his chums walked back to the house. "The missfulness will be most terrific," said Hurry. That kind of thing. It's so, yeah, arguably isn't all that progressive, but I think given the time, you know, I've read other boys' fiction from that historical period by other authors, and I've seen a lot worse. I don't think Richards is the worst offender. I think also that when there are characters within these books, I don't think it really occurs that much in this one, but if there are characters in these books where someone is behaving in a discriminatory manner or saying, you know, provocative things racially, that character is usually sort of cast as one of the bad eggs or one of the villains, and they sort of get their comeuppance. So yeah, I suppose it is fair to say that Frank Richards was as kind of adjusted as could be hoped for someone writing in this genre at the time. So anyway, yeah, DaCosta has been kind of parachuted into this school by these villains to try and discredit Wharton, to try and sort of lead him over to the bad side, right? Which, of course, you know is never going to bloody happen. Of course not, right? Because he's just too much of a good chap, right? So what actually happens is that DaCosta, the Eurasian, is brought over to the good side by exposure to these thoroughly decent fellows. I mean, this evidently doesn't work there's other regulars within these stories who are impervious to that. I mean, they know Bunter's ordinary, he never improves, and there are worse people than him. So, having failed at that, the crooked captain himself shows up, and there's this comedy of errors where Bunter, I don't know what age kids in the remove are. I suppose it's on that kind of cusp of puberty, 13-ish. Bunter gets the idea that the girl who works in the cake shop might be impressible. He's getting ideas about the girl in the cake shop, right? So he decides that if he just sort of pinches everybody else's best clothes, then that's going to work. So he's kind of tramping off to the cake shop, but the other lads rumble him, and this turns into a bit of a chase. He runs headlong into the lurking crooked captain, who's spending a suspicious amount of time hanging around a boys' school, which, yeah... different times, as I say. So Bunter drops the top hat he was wearing. The guy picks it up, and of course it's Wharton's, and it's got Wharton's name in it. So the crooked captain, I think his name's Captain Packer, gets the idea that Bunter is Harry Wharton. So he gets to work on trying to corrupt Bunter, which is really easy to do, right? So then he kind of importunes Bunter on another sort of country walk, and gets all chummy with him, and this leads to him sort of taking him on days out and giving him expensive cigarettes and taking him to pubs and taking him to the horse races, right, which the other lads sort of quickly find out about, and it's just kind of, yes, it's a bit awfully rum, isn't it? This adult sort of latching onto a 13-year-old like that. What's with that? But of course Bunter is very easily bad choice of word. Bunter is very easily kind of influenced by this, and he starts affecting airs. He's swanking around the school, calling himself, and I had to look this word up incidentally, a rorty dog. R-O-R-T Why? I had to look that up. It seems to be a word of 19th century origin, a cross between rowdy and naughty. Yeah, so there's this whole comedy of the captain kind of corrupting the wrong kid and Bunter getting all the cakes he can eat, he takes to cigarettes with the same gusto he takes to cakes. So yeah, of course, this bit it all comes good in the end. But yeah, from a modern perspective, the idea of this weird stranger popping up in the undergrowth around a boys' school and sort of, do you want to come to the pub? Do you want to come gambling? And what? It's quite strange, really. But there you go. You have to sort of adjust your perspective. This one, I think, more efficiently written than some. The other one I tried, there was so much padding in it. They're quite formulaic, these books, which is understandable because he had to churn out these stories, but I don't know what his rate was per week, but because they were originally going into this kind of periodical. I don't know if it was weekly or monthly, but it was a boys' paper, The Magnet, I think it was. So these stories had to just be churned out so that they are very, very formulaic. And a lot of it is these kind of daft comedies of misunderstanding, which are really kind of dragged out, get tedious really quickly. Actually, you get this sort of somebody talking about something and the other chaps misunderstand it as something else, but the guy can never get the words out to explain what he really means because they keep butting in and interrupting, and this goes on for several pages, and then at the end of when they do realise, you then get this "Ha ha ha," said Harry Wharton. "Ha ha ha," cried Bob Cherry. It goes through the whole list of everyone sort of going, "Ha ha ha." So that's about another page. This one's a lot more efficiently dealt with. They've kind of cut out a lot of the superfluous stuff. I would say flab, but that would be playing to the rather dated stereotype there. It was a bit of fun, this one, I got to say. But you kind of have to approach them with a certain amount of, okay, that was then. All right, anyway, I've rambled enough. Thank you very much for that. I hope everyone's doing well, and see you fellows next time.